What is up, Flutter devs? Today we are going to extract the color settings group of properties or methods from our core definition in Flutter Processing over to its own file to continue refactoring and simplifying this code so that developers like you can contribute to this project in the future. Let's go jump in. There's only a few methods that we need to migrate in this video: background, fill, no fill, stroke, and no stroke. And those are all very simple and obvious, except for one detail of the background call. The background call, it of course will paint a background color when you invoke it, but it also stores the last color that was passed as the background color, because that background color is then used up here in do setup. In setup, we want to clear the window and possibly apply a background color. So this creates an issue for us, because if we move these four methods to their own file and background color is kept private, as it really should be, then there's no way for this class in this file to access that private property. We could make the property public, but then anybody who's implementing a sketch or extending sketch will have access to this variable. And you're not supposed to have access to it. You're supposed to call it the background method. Well, I think what we're going to do, starting with this extraction, is we're going to make use of a directive in Dart called part. Part and part of. This is a way of giving two files essentially private access to each other. In general, this is not a great thing to do, but I think in this case, where we have so many methods that we're implementing and we do want some things to be private, I think in this case, it's going to be okay. So avoid it if you can, but I think if you have a strong argument for it, then maybe you use this directive. So let's look at how we're going to actually accomplish this. First, this is color/settings. We're going to come under color. We're going to create a new file called setting. We're then going to say mixin sketch color setting on base sketch, because we need access to the painting system. We're going to come back over here to core. We're going to grab these methods, cut them, come in here and paste them. Size apparently calls background. That's okay once we mix it in. But then up here where we access background color, currently that still compiles because actually background color is defined here inside of Sketch. We need to actually cut this out and paste it in our Sketch color setting. But this is where the problem comes in. If we come back here to our sketch definition, we are trying to access underscore background color, and there is no more underscore background color. So here's the change that we're going to make. We're not going to import this file, the file that we just created called setting. Instead, we're going to say part color setting. And then we're going to come over to setting. And instead of importing stuff, we're not going to import anything. We're going to say part of core. Now these two files are connected from a compiler standpoint. Everything in I don't know if it's two-way actually or just one way, but certainly from core.dart, we can now access background color. It's as if background color is public in core. Now that doesn't quite solve our problem yet because we haven't actually used the mixin. But if we come down here, wherever this sketch definition is, and we say sketch color setting, now all of our compile issues on the right disappear. So what are the downsides of doing this? Well, first of all of those private details are exposed to any other file that is part of this larger library. So privacy within the, like there is no privacy within the library if you do this. Anything that has an underscore inside of this mixin will be public to anything that uses the mixin. Now that's only a problem if you aren't somewhat careful and conservative with what you're declaring and exposing and using. So you need to be aware of this. That's why in general, this is something to be avoided, because in general, you might end up with who knows how many developers working on how many different features. So in general, you don't want to just share private details everywhere. But the entire purpose of what we're doing by breaking out these files is we're taking behaviors that absolutely are literally a part of Sketch. These are Sketch behaviors, but because there are so many of them, we're kind of breaking them down into logical pieces. So this is one of the few cases where it probably actually does make sense to utilize the part directive and the part of directive. Now, I think again, just to remind us, there are no more compiler errors, so we're all good. That's all it took to extract that category. If we come down here to do setup, here's background color, no problem. If we do Command B, here we are over in the settings file. So we know exactly where this is coming from, and we can also, of course, call the background method. And then, did I leave? I can't remember if I left the comments in here or I got rid of them when I cut those methods out. Looks like I probably got rid of them. So that whole part, those series of methods are out of our main Sketch definition. They're mixed in, so they're part of the public API, but their implementation is over here in setting, and we still get away with having this private variable. There may be others to go backport. I'm trying to think now. In the last video, let's see, we had 2D primitives. Oh, well, in the last video, this was a concern, right? This public painting context. But maybe what we can do is this. Maybe we can get rid of that. And now there's just this private version, right? But that breaks our 2D primitives, because our 2D primitives are like, where did the painting context go? Let's try something. And let's replace painting context with underscore painting context. So this is actually reversing the change that we made last time. But let's do that. Now it still doesn't compile because underscore painting context is private. But let's see what happens if we take these imports. And this is another thing to keep in mind. When you use the part of directive, you can't have any imports. The main file that you are a part of needs to have the imports. And shapes needs a subdirectory now, shapes. Now let's come back to 2D primitives, and let's say part of core.dart. And then instead of importing 2D primitives, let's come down here and say part shape 2D primitives. Okay. Organize imports. I'm seeing no compilation issues here in core. I'm seeing no more compilations here in 2D primitives. So I think we just solved a problem from the previous video. Base Sketch. We know that base Sketch needs to expose a painting context, but I was unhappy that we had to make it public because unless you're working on this library, unless you're doing what I'm doing and working on this library, you shouldn't have access to painting context. That's a private implementation detail. But we had to make it public so other files could access it. Except now the other file uses the part directive, and so it has access to private information. Okay? So we made two changes in this video. First, we went in and we took the color settings like background, stroke, no stroke, fill, no fill, and we moved them to this setting file in the sketch color setting mixin. And then we shifted to the part and part of directive, which gives us access to private information. which we then also went and redid the sketch shape 2D primitives to also be a part of core. And now we have access to private information. We no longer have to expose the painting context publicly. So there is yet one more simplification. So moving forward, whenever we're using painting context or we have private variables that need to be shared with the sketch, we will use the part and part of directives, and then we will continue breaking this thing down. So I'll see you in the next video.